Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Leader Dorset Spur here. Back inside today. Where's the weather gone? It is absolutely miserable out there. It was a nice day yesterday and on Saturday, and a nice day out and everything. And today it's a bit miserable, but hey, listen, it is what it is. This is England. This is what we're used to, right? So yeah, of course the season has now kicked off, hasn't it? Albeit pre-season. But we are now under Thomas Frank. He's had his first game. He's had his first win. He's had his first goal scored. And we found a gem as well, all in the space of a weekend against League One side Reading. So let's not get too excited, right? I didn't go to the game. And I don't have Spurs Place. I didn't get to see the game in its total. Have watched the highlights, have watched the goals and seen what others are saying about the football and so on. So all seems really quite good in all things together, right? So of course we knew that Son and Romero were going to play. So essentially we kind of had an idea that he was going to play two different sides in this game, just to kind of give as many players an opportunity as possible, and that he did. By all accounts, the first half was pretty lackluster. A fair bit of efforts and so on, but nothing really too exciting to get our teeth into. Mikey Moore played on the left, and that kind of didn't really pick up until quite late on in the first half, from what I've kind of been able to glean, listening to other people talking and kind of from the highlights. Don't really see him mentioned very much at all. But yeah, some decent efforts. Pedro Porro putting the ball, in dead ball situations and so on, a little bit more crossing from him. And of course the fullbacks wasn't as deep as they would have been under Ange Postecoglou. So yeah, interesting from that point of view. I mean, the other interesting thing was around, it's been called out already, is around Frank and his tactics board glued to his hand, full on giving instructions and so on, along with the coaching team. Something that used to infuriate me really with Ange was the fact that he just kind of stood there with his hands in his pockets a lot of the time. Just kind of watching or getting frustrated as we get frustrated, but he could impact the game. We couldn't. I can't impact the game from my point of view where I'm sitting. Just throwing a few at people isn't going to make a difference. Whereas if he's down there and he could do something. So yeah, Thomas Frank obviously getting a little bit more involved maybe than Ange did, and something that we kind of been calling out. And one of my big criticisms of Ange, to be honest, and I always felt that he could do more to influence a game, and maybe that's where Frank is going to be better, and maybe that's where he's going to shine and really give us something to kind of think about and hopefully be able to, I mean, a lot of the times in last season we ended up not being able to see out games, and that was again another criticism, is that we were doing stuff like that rather than actually being able to, losing a game from a winning position or whatever, rather than kind of being able to close things down, shut things up, go a bit deeper or whatever. We tended to just keep going and end up getting caught out and stuff. I think of the Leicester game, for instance, as one of those, and certainly the problems that we had when we lost to Brighton when the season turned, in my opinion. So yeah, so good from that point of view. And of course, second half is kind of where it all happened, because we saw our first glimpses of what Kudus could do. Had a really decent half. There's a clip going around on all the socials of him running up the right wing, and him and a little kind of tap off from Jed Spence to keep the ball in, and him kind of tearing up the wing, looking really direct and going at players. Something we really wanted from Brennan Johnson that he just didn't have or hasn't got in his locker, where he can be a lot more direct and a lot more forceful. And kind of seeing him going in there, did get himself an assist as well, which we can kind of come on to. But of course, the main talk of the game. Well, let's not talk about that yet. Let's talk about. So in the second half, we got our first goal from Will Lancashire. Nice little headed on to the back post where he really didn't have to do an awful lot, just let it hit him to go in the net. So first goal under Thomas Frank comes from Will Lancashire, probably a player who's probably going to end up out on loan again, probably not going to feature in the first team in the longer term. But getting a run out on the day and not doing himself any misfortune by being able to put the ball in the back of the net. But that came off the main talking point of the match is Vuskovic. So bought as a 16-year-old kid for something like, I don't know, 12, 13 million pound or something, unable to play for us for 2 years, been out on loan, kind of tearing it up in Belgium and so on. Comes over, gets his first start, blocks one on the line, does a heads on to get Will Lancashire to get himself an assist, and then from Kudus picks out a lovely goal himself. Far corner, sweet strike into the back of the net. And of course, everyone is now raving about this kid. 18 years of age, but huge, looks absolutely massive. When you look at him against the crowd of players around him, he looked absolutely massive. But very well spoken, very articulate as well. So really, really good to see. I'm not sure whether he's one that's going to come and go out on loan. To be honest with you, I don't think that may be the case. I think he may have done himself a bit of a favour having such a good debut. But I don't think the plan was always for him to go out. I could be wrong, but it does seem like he's one that they really need to take a look at because, okay, one game doesn't make a season, but it'll be interesting to see, a bit more of him at time comes and how he trains and all the rest of it because, we've got some good options there. Because Van der Ven and Romero are obviously going to be the starting two, right? But then you've got Kevin Danso and you've got Vuskovic as well. On top of that, you've still got Dragushin to come back and Ashley Phillips to think about and all the rest of it. Archie Gray, is he going to be more in the defensive role or is he going to get moved to the kind of six or whatever? I don't know. So it's interesting. So we are quite stacked in that position. So for me, I think Phillips is probably the one who's going to go out because he's been out since we bought him and hasn't really done enough to really shine. So it'll be interesting. I think, with Dragushin still being injured and the likelihood of Romero and Van der Ven needing rotating, I think it would make sense for him to kind of stick around, certainly until we know that Dragushin is back and fit and really playing, who I think would be the other one. So I think, generally speaking, it will be Danso and Dragushin. But with him being out and with the need to rotate, I think it maybe makes sense for him to stay on if he continues down this track. But if he goes out on loan, I think that's a bit of a shame, really, because depending on how he does over the next sort of few games, it is only League One, against Reading, so you've got to kind of give him a bit of time to see how he gets on against kind of better players and so on. But real bright opportunity there. Of course, the other one we've got is, who I've not mentioned, is I've forgotten his first name, Takai, the young Japanese lad who's come over. Personally, I think he may well also be one that goes out. I think he's coming from Asia. It's a big step up. We did the same with Yang, where he came over, stayed in London, but had the opportunity to kind of acclimatise to London, to England, to this way of life, to kind of still be able to associate with the players from Tottenham by being in London and so on. I know it's slightly different with him being Japanese as opposed to Korean or whatever, but I'm sure there are kind of cultural similarities, a bit like Europeans. We've got kind of social. If we went to an Asian country to try to live, we kind of probably associate more with other European people to kind of acclimatise and so on, and get your kind of feel your way. So I suspect, if anything, if he is going to go out on loan, I'm hoping it'll still be in the London area, to give him an opportunity to still stay close to the club and still feel part of it. But unless he's saying he wants 2 sets of backups, with having Danso and Dragushin and Takai and Vuskovic, for those all to kind of rotate around, Premier League, Champions League, League Cup, FA Cup. They're making such a big thing about this having to compete on all 4 fronts. You're not going to do that with one signing and a player coming in who's already been signed. Another 18-year-old kid, albeit having a really, really good game. So yeah, interesting. So Takai, I understand, didn't feature in because he's had a little bit of a knock, just an impact thing, so shouldn't keep him out for very long. But he wasn't able to play in the game on Saturday. The other one who kind of another problem with Richarlison. Richarlison didn't play. They're not saying he's injured, but they're saying they're trying to get layers into him, trying to build him up and be careful with him and so on. So I think there must be something going on there in terms of his overall fitness. And it's disappointing that this is, kind of going on. I don't think he's ever going to get fit enough for the Premier League, if I'm being honest. I think, out of anybody looking to leave, and I don't think it's Richie's fault, because I do feel that Richie has tried, he's worked hard, and you can see the disappointment in his face when he got injured the last time. He was absolutely gutted, and you can see how much it means for him to play football. He wants to play for Brazil, he wants to be Brazil's number 9, and he needs to play football, and he can't play football because he keeps getting injured, but he's trying not to, he obviously doesn't want to get injured, he wants to get out there and do his thing. So really disappointing for him, again, to be out as well. So yeah, interesting to see. We had Frank's presser prior to the game, where he talked about a few different things, wouldn't talk about other players and so on, which you kind of expect. And he did say that Maddison is sort of fairly close, but certainly Kulusevski won't be fit for the start of the season. So that's disappointing, and that still says to me, so you still definitely need to bring some players in, and this Morgan Gibbs-White thing really needs to be resolved. Okay, we've got Kudus who can go out and rotate maybe with Brennan Johnson and Odebear and so on, but obviously for that 10 you've still got Maddison out. Albeit he maybe will be back for the start of the season, but is he going to be fully fit? Is he going to need time? Is he going to need to be rotated? And if you haven't got Kulusevski to go in that position, where does that leave him? And that's why I think the Gibbs-White scenario is a really good one. Albeit Kudus can come in there and do that role, but it's not the ideal scenario, is it? When you've got a player like Gibbs-White who is literally hanging on the door. So I really do think that carries on. But again, it still brings us back to the point that we need another striker. Richarlison's not going to be fit enough to keep playing and be a regular contributor to the squad. That's a worry. So it is disappointing that we're only a matter of weeks or so away from going away to Hong Kong on the pre-season tour, and we've only brought in one real player, with Tell already being at the club and Danso and so on, obligations rather than new signings. So yeah, but interesting to see him kind of Blooding a lot of youngsters in there, a lot of other players, your Donnellys, Alfie Devine, I think, played, Will Lancashire played. So good to see them getting a run out just to show what they can do, whether that is to test, see whether they would be, good to go out on loan, or whether they need to stick around with the main squad. And I guess that again depends on deals, right? If you can't get any deals done, then why would you let Will Lancashire go? Unless, of course, you're going to promote Dane Scarlett, who we haven't seen anything from. I think he's got a little injury, small injury as well. I think they were talking about. So yeah, so it's interesting, but you're good to get off and running. A 2-0 win from pre-season does everybody the world of good. Get some minutes in their legs and so on. I guess the other, just to finally finish off, which is disappointing, is the lot of criticism for Sonny again. Which is a bit of a shame. I really don't want him to kill his legacy. But I say, watching the extended highlights, I don't think he was mentioned once, to be honest. I think there was one run where the ball just went straight past him and he didn't do anything. And there's a lot of people that were at the game and that calling it out, saying he's not the player, he's done, he's not happening. Now, I know we can all be reactionary, and I'm hoping we are being reactionary in this occasion, but there is no, you cannot sit here, and reminisce and be emotional about it. You've got to look at the cold hard facts. If Son isn't going to be able to perform at the level, even if that's a bit part, then he needs to protect his legacy and move on somewhere else. I, for one, am happy for it to be his decision, like it to be his decision. But I want him to be realistic with it as well. If he doesn't feel that he's going to be up to the standard, then I think the coaches and the manager need to kind of have that conversation with him that if you're fully fit and that's your performance, that's not going to be good enough for this team. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of pans out. I know the transfer window goes on for a fair while yet, and there's I know apart from like the main top six really doing business, everybody else is kind of trying to find their way and selling and buying as they go, picking up kind of players that are without clubs and everything. I do think that we have a strategy. I do think we've got targets, and I do think they are working on those targets. It's just frustrating as a fan when you're waiting for something to happen, or looking at Fabrizio Romano and where's the here we go. There was a little bit of a glimmer today where it was reported that Gibbs White hasn't travelled to Portugal as planned. But I've seen something else that says, this is due to a personal matter and not related to football. So, I don't know. Could it be? Could it not be? I don't know. Are we going to see a here we go today? Fingers crossed, that would be fantastic. Because then we can move on to the next thing and see where we are. Because I think that's a really good bit of business. Add to the squad another striker, and I think you're in a more decent position going into the league in terms of the flexibility of the squad. I'd still like to see a left-sided the left back, and I know we've got Spence as the left back support or Davis. But again, I don't really want to be relying on Ben Davies, with all due respect to him. I don't really want to be relying on him for another year in that position. But if that means, it's because we're splashing the cash on Gibbs, White, Kudus and say Visser, then I'll kind of accept it, and think, well, maybe in January we can do something or whatever. Because, like I say, you can't afford to leave any of these windows without any work being done in it. But certainly from an attacking perspective, if we get Gibbs White in and a striker in, then you've got a really good attacking amount of players. And we have got a decent amount of defenders. Like I say, there's 6 of them there, 6 centre-backs in there, albeit, a couple of really young ones. But, they all look fairly decent. I like Kevin Danso. I think he's good. Dragushin, I thought, looked good when he first came. Okay, I had a few mistakes and everything. But playing in that kind of high press where you're under constant pressure may not have suited him. Whereas being a little bit more stable, having a little bit more protection, maybe that works better for him. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes. But for me, I still want to see Gibbs White over the line. I still want to see a striker, and I'd still love to see a left back. That would be my ideal transfer window to see us going into this season, and certainly players that have Premier League experience or at that level of Premier League kind of players. So interesting to see. So we're off and running. Up next is Luton Town. So be interesting to see how that pans out. Of course, and then they're off to the Far East for a spot of football against some big rivals. So be interesting to see how it pans out. I'll keep doing my videos. Hopefully you'll enjoy them. Hopefully you'll interact. Please do give me some comments. I love to see the comments. I've tried to respond to all of them. It's good to have that kind of chat. Thumbs ups on the videos, likes are really useful. Help promote the channel. Subs, if you're not subscribing to the channel, again, I know everyone says this, right? If you're not subscribing to the channel, please consider doing that, because something like 60% of all people that watch these videos don't subscribe to the channel. And trying to promote your channel is really difficult if you don't have the subscriptions. It's all free, so it won't cost you anything, especially if you like to see the videos as well, and you kind of come on and interact anyway. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you've got this far, I appreciate it. It's good to know that you're there, and I'll speak to you on the next one. And as always, I'll leave you with a up the Spurs.